And welcome to France in Focus, our look at stories making headlines across France. Coming up in today's show, hospitals and airports across France are getting ready in case of any contamination from the deadly Ebola virus. France has frequent air transport links with the most affected zones in Africa. It's 70 years since the start of the operation to liberate the south of France from Nazi rule. Many of the soldiers involved were from France's colonies and overseas territories, but for some of them, their role has only recently been recognised. And France has kept its tourism crown, once again coming out on top as the world's most visited country, way ahead of its nearest rivals. We'll be explaining why. France is on the alert as the Ebola virus shows no signs of slowing. No cases have been detected in this country yet, but France is a major air transport hub for West Africa. French airports are on standby and 9 hospitals around the country, including the Hôpital Bichat here in Paris, have been getting ready in case Ebola reaches French soil.
Each month, 500,000 passengers heading to or arriving from Africa pass through Paris's Charles de Gaulle airport. The French government has issued guidelines to arriving passengers who are also checked before boarding flights to Europe. If symptoms are detected en route, individuals are isolated on board before being quarantined at the airport.
We are well prepared about the visible signs of the illness, which are quite unique, so I'm not very worried. We will be able to cope, thanks to our health system.
If services detect a suspected Ebola case, the patient is transported to a specialised hospital, like this one, in Paris, with a dozen isolation rooms.
The pressure inside this room and the adjoining airlock is lower than that in the corridor. That means the air inside the rooms will not move into the corridor and therefore not contaminate the air there and other common areas.
A total of 9 hospitals are equipped for suspected cases of Ebola, 3 in Paris, 6 others across the country, including in Strasbourg. This hospital fits all the criteria. It has a heliport and an isolation corridor to ensure patients are confined as soon as they enter the premises. Other equipments enable medical teams to secure and transport samples collected.
You have several protections. First, the box itself, where you put the tubes containing the samples. Then you have this foam, in case there's an accident and a leak. You can close it, of course. And finally, you have this cardboard box, in which it will be transported.
Blood tests can verify a diagnostic within 24 hours. Meanwhile, to avoid contaminations, Ebola kits have been delivered to hospitals. Medical teams hope they will not need them.
This August here in France, there's a summer camp taking place for young people of a totally new kind. The participants are all aged between 15 and 23. They're from all over the world, and they're all victims of terror attacks. The aim of the project is to bring them together to share their experiences and give them some psychological relief from the trauma they've been through.
Far from the city, far from parents, summer camp is a chance for teenagers to test the waters of independence and learn more about themselves. That's especially true for the residents of this unique camp. The life of each one has been touched by terrorism. In 2007, Adrienne survived an attack on a tourist spot in Saudi Arabia.
We stopped to have a picnic on the side of the trail. There were 3 families in 3 4x4s. Another 4x4 passed us, then did a U-turn and came back 2 minutes later. They got out of the car and shot at us. Just like that, 4 people were dead, including my father.
Adrienne is taking part in Project Papillon, a therapeutic summer camp and the first of its kind in France. It's an idea that was born in the US after the September 11 attacks. At group therapy sessions, some of the young people open up for the very first time.
Group therapy helps them make sense of things. It's a mirror effect. He's been through the same thing as me, but he's found another way to get past it. They inspire each other.
Afternoons are taken up with art, theatre and music workshops, which let the participants express themselves in different ways.
In the morning, they really let it out. They were crying. What I'm trying to do, what the association wants from me, is a bit of respite. Often the kids ask me in the middle of a workshop if I have a minute. Come on, let's go and chat for a bit. So we talk.
The trauma they've suffered stays with the survivors for a long time. 16-year-old Shona from Israel was only 6 when she was caught in a rocket attack.
We were hit by shrapnel. I got some in my thigh. It was there for 9 years. They only removed it last year. I still remember every single detail.
Even if the memories never fade, by sharing them, the residents of this camp can help each other at least move past them.
France is marking the 70th anniversary this year of its liberation from Nazi rule in World War II. And this week, it's 70 years since a huge operation was launched to take back control of the south of France, following on from the D-Day landings in Normandy. Many of the troops on the front lines of that battle were from France's colonies and overseas territories. And for some, their role has only recently been recognised.
The battle for France moved south to the new landing between Caen and Toulon.
After the invasion of Normandy, other Allied forces landed in the south of France on August 15, 1944.
This operation went as smoothly as a perfectly rehearsed exercise at home. But it was, nonetheless, a new assault on Hitler's so-called fortress of Europe. Allied navies escorted hundreds of assault ships across the Mediterranean.
Operation Dragoon brought together men from all over the world. Americans and British, of course, but also thousands of French. These resistance fighters came from colonies in Africa as well as from overseas territories in the Caribbean. 70 years later, France paid tribute to these men who stood against Nazism. Born in Martinique, Rémi Oligny was one of them. An incredible life story.
When I was 18, I left Martinique. My parents had heard on the radio General de Gaulle's call.
Moi, Général de Gaulle, j'invite tous les Français qui veulent rester libres à m'écouter et à me suivre.
So we were ready to fight. Our parents had taught us so well to love the homeland that we couldn't resist going.
In January 1943, he sailed on a makeshift boat. The group had to hide. The Martinique was ruled then by French collaborators.
I left one morning at 8. I was dressed up as a fisherman. I pretended that I was going fishing.
Like Rémi Oligny, they were 2,500 from Guadeloupe and Martinique to head to the British-ruled islands of Dominica and St. Lucia, where they were greeted by French and American recruiting agents. Before fighting Hitler's troops, their journey took them to the United States. They trained at the Fort Dix camp in New Jersey to learn how to fight and how to be united in adversity.
Vous êtes endurcis, vous êtes disciplinés, et demain, vous pouvez rencontrer l'ennemi avec la certitude que vous êtes les plus forts.
The battalion from the French Antilles was then sent to North Africa. Operations would soon follow. Their first battle with the enemy was Monte Cassino in Italy. 115,000 Allied forces were killed.
That's where I lost a friend of mine from school. I left him at the cemetery. I'd rather not talk about it.
Finally, Rémi Oligny and his brothers-in-arms reached the Provence region south of France. For some 350 days, the Allies fought the Nazis, seizing the Rhône Valley and then Strasbourg as they made their way up north. For Rémi Oligny, it marked the end of his fighting in the war, and he returned to Martinique.
That's when the disappointment started. No one greeted us. My mother had to pick me up in a taxi at the port to bring me home.
President François Hollande recently awarded these World War II veterans with the highest decoration, the Légion d'honneur. An emotional moment for 91-year-old Rémi Oligny, a well-deserved medal at last.
Montmartre is a favourite hotspot for the legions of tourists who visit Paris, famed for the Sacré-Cœur Church, its cafes where great artists once hung out, and as the setting for the film Amélie. And it's far from the only tourist attraction. In fact, France has once again been named the world's top tourist destination, with 84.7 million visitors coming here every year.
Whether it was to Mont Saint-Michel, the Loire Valley, or maybe Paris, last year 85 million foreign tourists visited France, making the country once again the world's top tourist destination. One reason for that?
Good food.
The best food in the world, definitely. I love the food here.
France is the country of great cuisine, but not just that. The landscape and history keep visitors coming back. This Italian couple had already visited Paris and the Riviera. This year, they chose to holiday in Strasbourg.
The cathedral is very beautiful, but we only arrived yesterday. We haven't had time to see everything yet.
The country continues to attract huge numbers of visitors, but it's not all good news for tourism authorities. Revenues are lower than they'd like for the volume of visitors. The Spanish tourism sector brings in more money, even though fewer people take their holidays there. One reason receipts are lower in France: in 2012, 10 million of its visitors were just passing through on their way to a long break in another country. Another factor, those who do stay in France tend to take shorter breaks, a week on average, as opposed to 2-week holidays in Spain. Ultimately, French tourism authorities are optimistic. They believe the number of visitors will hit 100 million a year by 2030.
And this is where we have to wrap up this week's France in Focus. We'll leave you here in Paris's Montmartre. See you next time. Goodbye.